Hello, everybody. My name is Fawn, and I'd like to welcome you all to the uh, 50th anniversary festivities that are happening. This is the inaugural one for the Society of Scribes, as we are celebrating our 50th anniversary. It's really cool to know that before 1974, calligraphy was just dead. There was nothing going on
Wow.
except for until the Society of Scribes sprouted. And so we all got to be grateful for that. I'm slightly kidding.
Yeah.
I know that there were other guilds and there were other people doing calligraphy, but it's kind of different when the Society of Scribes is absent. Uh, I'm gonna mute everybody really quick. Here we go. Okay. So anyway, so yeah, we got a great kickoff activity today. We are kind of investigating or interrogating some members of the Society of Scribes who have been involved for a while, but we're doing it by kind of uh, introducing four members, two of whom have been involved in calligraphy and in the guild for quite some time, and two who are relatively new. So it's kind of two different generations of people involved in the calligraphy scene and involved with the Society of Scribes. The four people I have with me are Ina Saltz, Eleanor Winters, Lynne, and Jessie Fora. I'm going to go ahead and post their uh, links in the chat if you want to check out their portfolio and learn more about them. And I'd like to also, before we get started and asking them questions, just want to introduce all four of them. First, Deb, do you want to go ahead and get the slideshow ready and also show some of their works too? That's the magic of Zoom, by the way. So anyway, I'd like to introduce Ina Saltz, who is a calligrapher, art director, designer, author, photographer, and professor emeritus of design at the City College of New York. Ina served as an editorial art director for over 25 years, including at Time magazine. She's authored several books on typography and has created 9 online courses for LinkedIn Learning, including a beginning italic calligraphy course. She is a graduate of Cooper Union, where she first studied calligraphy with Don Koons. Soon after that, she studied with Donald Jackson and Herman Zapf. In her early 20s, she became the first elected president of the Society of Scribes.
That's me, 1976.
And next, we have Eleanor Winters. Eleanor is a commercial as well as fine art calligrapher and the author of 6 calligraphy instructional books, as well as Paris Auschwitz, Remembering the Children, a collection of her calligraphic paintings commemorating the children of Paris murdered by the Nazis in World War II. Eleanor directed the calligraphy workshop in New York City, taught at Long Island University, and for many years has taught for the Society of Scribes as well as for groups in the United States, Europe, and Asia. Her calligraphic art has been exhibited around the world. Eleanor joined the Society of Scribes in 1975, serving as corresponding secretary and vice president for several years. She and Carol Maurer edited the Society of Scribes Calligraphers Engagement Calendar, practically from its inception in 1978 until its final edition in 2005. And then we also have Lynne, who is a Korean-American typeface designer, technologist, and educator. From crafting woven calligraphic pieces to designing type for screens and publications, Lynne's work spans an evolving set of multimedia to bring a personal touch to everyday interactions. She is an alumna of the Type at Cooper Extended Program, School for Poetic Computation, and ITP at NYU, and has taught for Type at Cooper, Parsons School of Design, and the Letterform Archive. She has taught for the Society of Scribes and served on its board as an organizer of the Alice Scholarship for promising college-age students of calligraphy. She is a partner in Space Type Co. and Type Electives. And finally, we have Jessie Fora, who is an artist and tattooer at True Hand Society in Philadelphia. Oops, sorry. I'm moving too fast. Okay, now we're moving to Jessie Fora, artist and tattooer at True Hand Society in Philadelphia. She has been a tattooer for 20 years and specifically a lettering artist for about 10 years. A member of the Philadelphia Calligrapher Society, she's also been lucky enough to study under several calligraphers and lettering artists through the Society of Scribes and Cooper Union. Jessie has learned all types of lettering from black letter to copperplate, hand lettering, and beyond. Studying calligraphy and its history over the years has shown her proper composition and letter forms, which she uses in her work daily as a tattoo artist. She recently joined the Society of Scribes board to work on the Society's social media presence. Ta-da! And so those are the four people who will be speaking on their experiences in the calligraphy scene and with the Society of Scribes. I want to start out first by having the four of them talk about how they got involved in calligraphy, what the calligraphy scene was like when they began, and how did it intersect with calligraphy guilds and specifically the Society of Scribes? For those of you who are wondering, the two people who will be representing the earlier generation are Eleanor and Ina, and the team youngins are Lynne and Jessie. This is not so much a competition, although it may turn into one. You know, the sparks may fly, so check it out. But yeah, so my beginning question, and I'm going to start with Ina and Eleanor. Ina first. If you could talk about the start of your calligraphic education and how did it intersect with the Society of Scribes and maybe other calligraphy guilds, and what the scene was like when you were beginning.
Yes, well, I went to Cooper Union, as you mentioned, and calligraphy was required in the first year foundation program. And in fact, there were 4 calligraphy teachers at Cooper Union in the year that I entered, including Ismar David, Donald Bolognese, and my teacher, Don Coons. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the 4th one, but there were 4 sections. So I had fooled around with a broad-edged pen before that, but it really, my formal education began at Cooper Union. And there was a scene, but the scene was mostly on the West Coast. And I was very formally trained and very seriously trained. And in the West Coast philosophy, because Don Coons had come, Lloyd Reynolds was his mentor on the West Coast. And so Lloyd had recommended him to Cooper Union. And he ultimately became my main teacher there of calligraphy there. I want to say also that I was the second person to join the society after the initial 14 decided to open up the membership. How I heard about it, and of course I would have been in the initial 14, except I didn't know about this thing that was going on with Donald Jackson. And how I even heard of this meeting that was happening at 85th Avenue where I was able to join, I really don't remember. But anyway, I don't want to take up all the time because I could go on.
Eleanor?
Okay. Well, actually, my first link with the Society of Scribes came through Ina. Do you remember that, Ina?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Was that when you were carrying the drafting table up and in Robin's building, and I said, "Oh, are you an artist or something?" And then I told
like
you
that.
And then I told you about the society, and then
we had a mutual friend named Robin. This is back in the 70s. And before that, well, let me back up a little bit. So before that, I was drawing letters. I didn't know what calligraphy was. I had no idea that there was a movement, a field, that I never heard of Donald Jackson or any of the others. And what I used to do, I guess as a teenager, I would copy black letter. I think a lot of us started by, right? So the New York Times masthead was Old English, and I would, draw it and outline it and fill it in. And I thought, whoa, I'm really good, which I was not. And at a certain point, I heard about a calligraphy class at the Y. Anybody remember the WWII on 8th Avenue? And there was one teacher teaching one class, and that was Francis Manola, whom I know some of you in the audience studied with as well. Not that many years ago, maybe a few years ago, there was an exhibition in honor of her 100th birthday. and she's been gone a few years, but she started so many of us on italic, and the only class was italic. And after the first class, you could take the class again, and that was as far as we got. So at some point thereafter, there was Ina. Either I was carrying the drawing table or you were carrying the drawing table, but and
you
or,
were.
or maybe our friend Robin said, "Oh, you have to meet my friend Ina because she's a calligrapher." And Robin told me about the Society of Scribes. So I started going to meetings and workshops around 1975. I think it was about 1 year after the inception of the group, at which time all of the luminaries from the 70s were teaching and sharing. It was an amazing time. You know, anybody was there on weekends teaching workshops. And
oh man, you are stealing my words. I was going to say it was a who's who of the calligraphy world. It was, of course, Donald Jackson, Sheila Waters, Ismar David, Tom Gordy, Yehan Rees, Charles Pierce, Lloyd Reynolds, Bertold Volpe. I think Bertold Volpe and Paul Standard just gave talks. Sam Lightman, who taught brush lettering, you remember him, Eleanor?
I do.
Peter Thornton and Ewan Clayton, and I'm sure I'm forgetting many names. It was just a lightning rod. Everyone was there. Yeah.
Right. And the space that was used for classes, which Ina just mentioned at 85th Avenue, was a loft space that was either owned or offered by Pentalic Pen Company, which also was the publisher of many of the calligraphy books that are considered the classics now. So
it was Lou Strick. It was because Lou Strick had a friendship with Donald Jackson. And so somehow we got this incredible space to use whenever we wanted it. And we used it a lot and for free. So that was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable thing.
And shortly thereafter, and then I'm going to stop, Fan, because we have many more people here. Sorry. Shortly thereafter, Lou Strick established the calligraphy workshop, which was a school in that space in 85th Avenue in this loft space, and hired half a dozen, very fine teachers, which included Jeannie Wong, right? And do you remember others? Marty Oberstein, I think. There were 6, 7, 8 teachers and many classes that were open to the public at a very low cost. And this was all sponsored by Lou Strick, who was the president and owner of Pentalic, originally Pentalic Pens, and then Pentalic Publishing. And I'm going to stop because I'm sure I could continue. I probably will later. Okay, sorry, Fan?
Oh, no problem. That was great. I love hearing all these names.
I think Lou Strick was the godfather of the Society of Scribes, and Donald Jackson was the Pied Piper of the Society of Scribes.
And don't forget Paul Freeman. We have to talk about him at some
point. Well, we'll have to talk about it.
Okay. And going over this history, there are so many impressive names, but I am slightly less impressed because Edward Johnston wasn't there. So I didn't hear your name drop, Edward Johnston. So, but anyway.
He would have been.
Spirit. He was there in spirit.
So it runs the gamut of the, personalities who are very significant in the calligraphy scene, and especially in New York City. Nan Corbin is chatting. I'm hoping, Nan, that you also post those chats to everyone, because right now it just seems like it's chatting to me. But Nan notes that her husband had incorporated the Society of Scribes in the very beginning.
That's right.
She was at the original workshop with Donald Jackson, where he recommended the formation of guilds, including the Society of Scribes. And so that was in days long ago in a galaxy far, far away. But moving a little bit closer to the 21st century and some more contemporary times, I'd like to also hear from Lynne and Jessie. Beginning with Lynne, could you tell us how you got involved in the whole calligraphy scene and what it was like at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's compared to all the history that we've been hearing, which I love, by the way. I think I could just listen to you know, Ina and Eleanor, like you two talking about this like forever. I was like, I'm very enthralled here. And just like hearing all these names, which like, you know, like the greats that I know of, but not necessarily knowing what their connection like is and was to the Society of Scribes. Like it's great. Like this is such a treat for me. Anyhow, so um I have a background in graphic design. And then so like I did my bachelor's at the School of Visual Arts, where the Society of Scribes classes were held, but which I did not know of when I was a student. And then like after graduating, I went to the West Coast to work at Apple as a graphic designer. And then like during that time, like I actually had no idea what calligraphy was. It just because like in like the art school curriculum, there was no, the calligraphy just wasn't taught at that stage, like 2009. You know, and then like what happened was that like I went on a corporate project which required a lot of handwriting because that's when the iPads were like getting really popular and they wanted to do this campaign about like, oh, handwriting on an iPad. And of course I was like, I don't know how handwriting works. I'm gonna go learn like how to write better. And I stumbled onto the Friends of Calligraphy, which is the guild over in San Francisco. So I started taking classes there. And then, long story short, I came back to New York City to study type design at the Cooper Union, which so Type of Cooper is a program that I went to, which is organized, founded and organized by Cara D'Eduardo, who used to be president of Society of Scribes. So I think like I had kind of like been hearing about the Society of Scribes as I was learning type design, and then the Llewellyn Center in New York City has a lot of calligraphy that is made by members of the Society of Scribes and such. So like there was at the Cooper Union, of course, Ina, you were just talking about it. Like there's a lot of, you know, like the great works like in the archive. And so I was getting really fascinated that like, oh, people can write this and like it's amazing. And then after studying type design, I was like, okay, I want to go take classes in calligraphy again because I had gotten my toes wet a little bit at Friends of Calligraphy. And then what happened, of course, Eleanor, as you were saying, like a black letter is like sort of like the gateway drug for a lot of young people to find their way. And of course, like Luca Barcelona, who does these really huge, like graffiti esque black letter, like on giant walls, was having a workshop at the Society of Scribes, which was insanely popular. And of course I didn't get into, but then like there was a waiting list by lottery, and I think it was like the day before the workshop or something like that, where like one spot opened up and I guess like someone did the lottery. And like, oh, like you, if you want the spot, like you're in, the spot just opened up. So like I packed my things and the next day I went over to Society of Scribes, my first workshop ever with Luca Barcelona. And then that was, you know, and then like that was how it happened. And I mean afterwards it just opened up a whole new way where I wanted to take classes with like all these different people. And like in the Zoom, it's very exciting for me because like I see a lot of folks who I took like you know, all my formative classes with, like Anna Pinto, you know, like Barry, like I love taking your Gothic capitals, like, and then Eleanor Winters, like Copperplate book was also like on like a prime like place in my bookshelf for a long time. Like your Copperplate book was very formative and like, you know, like learning that style. And later I took a class with Eleanor Holland for Copperplate as well. And yes, just so thankful for everything that I've learned and, you know, folks that I've met through the Society of Scribes. And I'll pass my mic off to Jessie with that note.
Hi, I'm Jessie. My full name is Jessie Fora. I go by Jessie Fora. I don't want that to be too confusing, so I apologize. I'm at my studio here in Philadelphia currently, so there's a little background music. I apologize. Yeah, I've been tattooing like this is 23 years for me, and I've been a tattooer of lettering the majority of my career. And it got to a point where I was getting it so often, I really wanted to dive into it more and like learn the right way to do it, because I'm doing it and I'm like, there's just something wrong with what I'm doing. Like, it's not perfect, you know? So I started taking classes. I worked one-on-one with Kathy Malisi, and did a lot of that. From there, I took a ton of classes at Society of Scribes and Cooper Type, and any chance I could take a class, I was taking it. And actually, Lynn, I was taking your class in with hand lettering in 2020, when like right as the pandemic like started to get rolling, and our class got cut short, unfortunately. But you were the one that was like, why don't you join the board of Society of Scribes? And I was like, I mean, I never thought about that, and here I am. So yeah, so thank you. And yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to like there's a whole world of tattooers out there that do lettering, especially like walk-in tattooers, or people who specialize in lettering like I do, who could really benefit from a lot of these classes. And I'm just excited to like bridge that world, from those those people to you guys. It's gonna be great.
Thanks, Jessie and Lynn.
Yeah, thank you.
I do want to mention Lynn had brought up Eleanor's book, Master in Copperplate Calligraphy, which, I know that so many people, when I ask them how they got started in calligraphy, or their first book, especially for those who work in pointed pen, so many people have told me their first book was Eleanor's book, Master in Copperplate Calligraphy. It seems like almost everybody gets their start when they're doing pointed pen with that book. So check that out. I'd like to start out now by asking a question and hoping. Oh,
One
Eleanor.
comment about this.
Yeah.
That book is published by Dover, and I remember mentioning to someone from Paper and Ink Books, that Paper and Ink Arts, that that book is still in print after many, many years. And what she said, so I'm not taking any credit here, what she said is Dover has the biggest warehouses, so they can stockpile all their books forever. And that's, I mean, I think it's a good beginner book, but I think it's available thanks to Dover.
And yeah, woohoo Dover. Yeah. They have been great with reproducing and reprinting a lot of out of print important books on calligraphy of all certain types of calligraphy. Now I'd like to begin with the question, and I'm hoping that the four panelists will also interject too, and don't wait for the next question. Just feel free to interject when you want to. The four panelists, not everyone else yet. But I'd like to start by asking the Eleanor and Ina how you feel the calligraphy scene has changed from when you got started until now. I'm sure it has gone through several changes. And there's always the question of, is calligraphy dead? Like I said, it's not dead because of the Society of Scribes, but but even before, like if I look at calligraphy journals from way back, and they're always talking about calligraphy's dead, calligraphy's making a comeback, calligraphy is being revived, and it goes on and on. It's like, well, did it ever die? Did it ever really make a comeback? Has it just always been a continual thing? And every once in a while, a newspaper will take notice and write a new article saying, these people are reviving calligraphy. But I'd like to hear from Ina and Eleanor first, and hoping that Lynne and Jessie will also interject. How has the scene changed from when you first started? You were talking about what it was like in the mid-'70s, and how has it evolved since then?
Well, I want to say that, because of the advent and popularity of the personal computer, I think that calligraphy will always be important because people just have a natural desire to make things with their hands. And it just feels very good to connect with your humanity by making it's almost magical as the ink comes out of your pen, and it's very sensual and delicious. And I think that will always be something that people will love. And I suggested the title of this this talk to Anna because I said, who knew, you know, when you talk about the scene, I mean, we were so ad hoc. We were so, you know, everything was so kind of, who knew that this society would last this long? It's unbelievable to me that it is still going strong. Not surprising because I think it's a natural thing that people love to make things with their hands. But I'm just kind of blown away that after all this time, people are making beautiful work. I mean, Lynne, Jessie, your work is amazing. I think it's fantastic that, you know, and typography and lettering and calligraphy are kind of, I call it my Venn diagram, you know, they're all kind of in a mix and affect one another. And, you know, I think it's a golden age personally of type design, calligraphy, attentiveness to letter forms and the understanding that letter forms are everything. And anyway, that's my opinion. I agree with you though. We are sort of a subculture in a way. And so, yes, the mainstream media will occasionally say, oh, look what I discovered. It's been there all along, but they like discovered it, you know, so they wrote a story. Great, that's great. So anyway, and there was the Brody Neuschwander thing on Nova of the story of handwriting. That was fantastic. I mean, that's very mainstream. So I would say it never went away. That's my answer.
Okay. Well, I agree with all of that, but I'll answer the first part of your question, Fun, about how it was back then and what has changed. And back when I started being seriously interested in calligraphy, there was very little around, and the word was not very well known. People would say, calligraphy, well, what is that? Even relatively educated people were unaware of that. And I'll give you a brief anecdote. In one of my early classes that I was teaching, it was at the New School, which had a wide variety of classes. I had a group of students for a beginner class, and there was a man in the back of the room who looked confused and puzzled. And finally, at the end of the class, he came over to me and said, I might be in the wrong class. And I said, well, what class did you want to be in? And he said, upholstery. So really happened. So it took a while for it to become mainstream, I would say. And one of the things that was very interesting back then, I know, I'm sure you'll agree, is how small a club we were. You know, you knew everybody who did calligraphy. You certainly knew the New York group.
Not only that, you know, after I became president and I was corresponding with calligraphers all over the world, there were just tiny little, you know, hot spots, I would call them.
Yeah, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, and then, of course, England, where they had
but Estonia,
yeah.
You know, there were interesting places where people were doing calligraphy, not in a vacuum, but there wasn't all the connective tissue that we have now. And of course, the main connective tissue that we have now is the internet. I mean, I've had over 286,000 people take my course on LinkedIn Learning on calligraphy. I mean, it's amazing the reach that we have now that we never had before. We were all like groping around in the dark.
Yeah, but also in answer to another question that you asked, Fan, about whether calligraphy has ever stopped and started again and stopped. My observation over 50 years has been that there's been a kind of ebb and flow, and there have been periods of years at a time where there just wasn't a lot of interest, and then other times where there would be a research, and often the research would come from more young people, like you two, suddenly waking up to calligraphy or discovering calligraphy. And I remember one period in the history of the Society of Scribes where we had a president, whose name I will not mention, who would call me often and say, nobody is doing this anymore, calligraphy is dead. And I would say to her, just wait a little while, this might be a quiet month or a quiet year, it's going to come back. And in fact, it did. There would be I think her problem was there were no volunteers for the
Mhm.
Society of Scribes. You know, the typical problem of a volunteer organization is getting people to do the work. And she would say, if I don't do everything myself, nothing gets done. And I would say, but this has happened. It happened 5 years ago and it happened 10 years ago. But at each time it reemerges with new blood, with new members. So I would say, definitely, I agree with Ina that we're now at a really wonderful moment where so much is being interacting with typography, with tattooing, with drawn lettering, with wall painting, but it has been around. I mean, it's just been quiet sometimes, and then it's reemerged very dramatically sometimes.
So I'd like to ask Jessie and Lynn, hearing Ina and Eleanor speak about the changes and about what it was like in the 70s, comparing it to how you got into it and where it's at now, what do you see are the differences, especially with people getting, a lot of their exposure to calligraphy from Instagram? What, like, are there, how does it reconcile with all the other types of the lettering arts and the technologies today, especially with Lynn, that you kind of are at the forefront of the cutting edge technology of expression of lettering, and Jessie coming in from the tattoo arts. How do you two see the differences between now and what your perceptions of how it was like in the past?
I think social media definitely changes the landscape very quickly, depending on what's trending at the time, for better and worse, right? Like, I was just talking to some friends about how like social media trends and like what kind of social media apps are popular dictate what kind of algorithms are popular, which might dictate like, what cultural things are at the forefront. Right. And then so if it used to be that like in the past, like whatever was on like mainstream news or mainstream like, TV would be like the thing that gets really trendy, or like popular magazines. Like now it's like social media and like all these little rabbit holes that people fall into, for better and worse. And so, I mean, compared to Eleanor and Ina, I have like well, maybe only a singular decade and a half of experience of trend watching to report. But I have to say, like, even in like 2000, like not 2010, for example, if I said, oh, like I'm taking calligraphy classes, like a lot of people will be like, what's that? And I think there was this dramatic shift like some years later when like I think there was specifically a calligraphy trend that got really popular on Instagram, where like I know that like a lot of us were kind of laughing at it. It was like along with like, the trends of like dripping wax and like the wax seals and like the really thick like pointed pen calligraphy, like like it was like with shimmering ink and it was just one letter really zoomed in, or something to that point. But like I think there was a dramatic shift before and after. And I want to say that was like maybe 2016 or 17 or something like that. There's this dramatic shift where like ever since, if I say like, oh, like I teach calligraphy or something about calligraphy, everyone always knows what calligraphy is. They might have the wrong idea that like it's always with like some whatever thing that they saw. But just the fact that people know the word calligraphy is, I think, a huge shift. And I think, this is how like, I don't know, some viral video of like some little cute dog like goes viral and now everybody knows what like a French bulldog is. But like, yeah. But in many ways, I think it has done leaps and bounds. And I think the same has happened with sign painting and different kinds of letter arts over the years. Where like people know what black letter is, and it's not like, oh, like the death metal band logo style, like people have words and vocabulary now, even if they're not like designers and artists who are like, in this sphere, right, specifically. Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about this. But I think it's one of those things where at the very minimum, it's just we can take it for granted, I think, that like people will know what the art of writing is. And I think that's a good shift in my eyes, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, obviously, with you. I mean, it's definitely like it's kind of crazy. You know, when I was in Anna Pinto's italic class, Anna showed me Ina's books, the body type. I have them with me. I'm like, I love them. But when Anna showed me these books, I was like, or like told me about them, I was like, wait, you guys know about tattoos? Like this is wild to me. Like I'm over here thinking I'm like the only one in the world that's I'm like I'm gonna be the one that's like linking you guys, and you already know, you know, it's but same with tattooing. Like tattooers know lettering, like they know copperplate, they know you know, black letter. They have an idea of what it is. And I think introducing like a lot of what you guys have to offer, like more of the historical stuff, and like really getting down to you know, learning structure of letters and all that stuff. I think tattooers are really you know, it's eye-opening for them, because they're like, I didn't know that you know, you know, this is the way you made like a black letter A, or you know, like I didn't know that, you know, there were like shapes to it, or you know, it's wild to see these people like understanding it in a better manner, and everybody's so interested in it. So while it is like blowing up on social media and it is like trending in a way, I think people do have a true desire to learn more about it. I mean, tattooers use the word this is kind of funny, but we use the word calligraphy all the time to like thicken up a line, and so we know what it is. It's just, you know, it's just an interesting way to explain like how to thicken up a line, I guess. But yeah, I think it's there. Everybody truly loves it. So
I think what's interesting. Oh, it was Ina, go ahead.
I just want to say, I'm thinking of all the people who took my classes at Cooper Union over the 20 years that I taught there. And I had cake decorators who wanted to learn how to do more beautiful lettering in cakes. I had carvers from the Cathedral of St. John the Divine who were carving letter forms, and they wanted to know more about letter. I mean, I think it's just everywhere and spans so many different uses and cultures. And it was always fascinating to me, like, okay, why are you taking this class? So, and the tattooing, of course, yes. And I know I might even have some of your work in my book, because I would usually go to the person in my books, because I would go to the person who had the tattoos. They didn't always tell me who did the tattoos or who designed the tattoos. But yeah, that's been my thing for a long time. It's a weird sort of, I'm glad you appreciate it.
When we're talking about like how people get involved in calligraphy and the professions that they start with that lead them to calligraphy, it's very different from how it was earlier, as had been mentioned, how, you know, it used to be that when you got involved in the graphic arts, graphic design, that you were often required to take a course in lettering, having to learn how to draw letters or having to learn calligraphy. And these days, it's not the same. You know, it's not a required course if you're getting into the graphic arts. But and you know, things are done with the computer now, and so it's kind of forgotten. You know, this idea of how to hand letter things, or hand lettering is seen as more of a niche, kind of you know, cutesy type of thing to do, rather than art and craft of its own that can, you know, that you can go very far with. So I'd like to hear from you too about how, you know, the different fields in which people are starting to get involved in calligraphy, how you see it as instructors and as students, and as people who are involved in lots of different scenes, you know, other outside of calligraphy, you know, whether it's involved in tattooing, Lynn, you getting involved in type design and all of that. Like, what are the avenues in which people are like learning about calligraphy and getting into calligraphy? How does that happen? You know, especially with calligraphy there being a lot of misconceptions about calligraphy, stereotypes about calligraphy that might impede interest in it. How do people get, you know, through that? And Lynn mentioned a little bit about black letter being a gateway drug, you know, which is also good. You know, the first letter is free. That's how you hook them in. But anyway, yeah, I'd like to hear from you all about tangential fields in which people might find a pathway to getting into calligraphy and lettering?
I mean, I think all of us on the panel teach, so we probably get to see the trends over time. And I think when I see people encountering like calligraphy and wanting to dive more deeper into it, like I think I mean, again, like this is probably not news that like however people interact with the world throughout daily life is where people get into these things. And so if I teach continuing education classes where like the student body is more like of like working adults where like they might be like looking around and maybe a client of theirs like wanted like some sort of elaborate thing and they're like, oh wait, there's people who do this for a living, right? So they might encounter that through work. But like when I teach undergrad, it is primarily the social media trends are just so obvious because it's like just 1 week I'll bring in some inspirations for things that you might want to do, and whatever was trending that week is just like a quarter of the students have like the same exact images on their like inspiration board, so to speak. But I think there is this interesting shift with the pandemic that I have seen where especially younger students like who have like lived a lot of their university degrees like on the screen like have this like reaction where they want to go back to the physical, like as Ina was talking about, like they want to go back to doing something with their hands. Like I have, this is so strange, but like I do portfolio reviews for senior undergrad students at the end of the year. And the past couple of years, I have seen more hand-bound portfolio books that I have ever seen since like the last decade. I like nobody, it was so uncool to be binding your own portfolio because it wasn't like this perfect machine bound, like perfect bound thing. Or like, oh, I just have a website, but like it's the shift is quite dramatic where people want to be doing DIY. I think like in the chat, like somebody was also talking about the DIY culture aesthetic, like kind of coming back, right? Like calligraphy, hand lettering, like at sign painting, there's all these moments of like people reacting to the digital where they want to go back to the hand crafted material of like the tactile qualities and making things with your hands. And I suppose like, yeah, so I think I lost the trail of thought a little bit there, but I want to say that like younger students, if I go back to that point, like more than ever are wanting to do things with their hands because it is much more enjoyable. And I'm not talking about the end product. Like I don't think I don't perceive the end product to be like more value. At least I think they don't think it's more valuable per se to have this hand-on quality, but they really put the emphasis on a process where like it's like almost taking care of oneself, almost to be making with your own hands. And so if the product is that like it's made with the hands, that's great. But like it's almost like a form of self-care. And like I know like perhaps a lot of us have seen like art therapy also rising in the popularity ranks, and maybe it kind of coincides. I don't know. But that's just what I've been seeing.
Anyone else?
Ask us another question.
Okay.
I think I will answer that briefly, which is just about where my students come from and what I see as the trend. My teaching in the last few years is almost exclusively online ever since COVID, and I've given myself the task of holding the line on traditional calligraphy because there's a lot of opportunity to learn all kinds of non-traditional calligraphy, which includes a lot of wonderful work. But I have felt that there isn't enough instruction available in the basics, and not just the basics like this is a pen and this is your ink, but what is Carolingian and what happened in the Middle Ages and what Roman capitals are meant to look like. So the classes I teach tend to be very traditional and historically oriented. And my students are very often focused on the craft. And when I say the craft, I don't mean that in a broad sense. I mean, almost in a narrow sense. What constitutes these letter forms? Why are they beautiful? Why are these manuscripts that we look at, why are they so elegant? What did they do in in the Book of Kells? What did they do in the 13th century or the 12th century? So I'm sure some of my students have graphic design skills or have other art skills, but they're there for the lettering. And I hope this continues, because I think the future of calligraphy has to start with understanding our history, not just the history of the Society of Scribes, but the history of 2,000 years of Western calligraphy.
So, Eleanor, what you said raises another question, which I think is important to talk about, which is that, since the pandemic, a lot of calligraphy instruction has moved online, especially through Zoom. But even before that, Ina was sort of a pioneer, doing it through LinkedIn Learning, having a calligraphy course there. Of course, that wasn't the first type of its kind, but I think it was a really prominent introduction to calligraphy that was available online at the time. And so I'd like to hear how you feel calligraphy instruction has changed, and what that means for the scene of calligraphy, and also what are the drawbacks, and what do you see compared to how you used to maybe teach more often in person, and now there's a lot more online teaching. How has that changed? What are the drawbacks? What are the advantages? And what do you prefer in terms of teaching, and where do you see calligraphy teaching going?
Oh gosh, well, I'll jump in since you mentioned my course. I mean, obviously, when you are teaching in person, you can literally hold on to someone's hand to change their grip or their pen edge angle, which you can't do in an online course. And also, I could show lefties, I could kind of hold their arm in a certain way so they could write. And, or if someone's having trouble getting the ink to flow. These are real beginner issues, but, I can suggest things online, but there's nothing like, I have other classes on LinkedIn Learning, and I like to say, well, I can reach this enormous audience. That's the plus. The minus is I can't look into their eyes and see comprehension dawning. I can't, tell. Yes, you're laughing, Lynn, but that's exactly how I feel. So I do miss that aspect of it. But on the other hand, you're reaching people all over the world who maybe can't go out and take a calligraphy course because they're disabled, or they're taking care of someone who's disabled, or they're young mothers, or whatever, for whatever reason. That isn't it wonderful that they can access an online course? But of course, there's nothing like a course in person.
Okay, I agree. And what else was I going to say about that? I have learned to love online teaching. I was very resistant in the beginning. For the rest of you, I said, with the pandemic, right? So she from the Society of Scribes, who might be here today, called me at the beginning of the pandemic and said, do you want to switch to online? And I said, no, this will be over in a few weeks. I'll just wait. And right, did we all say that? And then a week later, a month later, eventually she said, if you want to continue the class, I had started a class in person. She said, if you want to finish the class, this looks like the only way to do it. So I said, okay. And since then, it's become most of my teaching. I do some teaching live, not a lot, and a lot online. And Ina, I feel exactly the way you do. There's something about being present with the students where whether they're getting it, you can sense when they are loving it. That's a very nice feeling. I mean, somebody could send you something in the chat saying, I love this class, but it's not the same. And also you can help them in these important, minute ways that become all important eventually. However, having said that, there's also this amazing advantage of being able to work with people in Australia and New Zealand and Malaysia and everywhere. And as long as you get the time zones right, which can be a bit tricky, right? They're there, you're together. And by for me, by limiting the class size, I don't want to teach very big classes. I can actually look at their work while they're doing it. We have ways of, they can scan something, email it to me, I print it out, I put it onto my camera, I critique it. I could say, oh, your pen angle is a little bit off here, or change the spacing between these two letters. And we do our best, given that we're not in the same room. So they're both good ways to teach. And I think all of us as teachers have to design our own approach to it. I'm not particularly in favor of classes with hundreds, except for disseminating information. I'm not sure I can do much with the students when the class is that big. There's no time.
Yeah, I think for tattooers especially, it's I think a lot of people are either afraid to show up to class, or like not embarrassed, but like afraid to show that they don't know how to do something. So I think that goes for a lot of people, not just tattooers, but I think it's doing the online classes is a great way to kind of introduce this and make it to show them like you're not, it's okay to not know how to do something. Like there's so many people on the same boat, and there's so many people taking this class, and and spark an interest that maybe they would want to show up to an in-person class one day. But I do think the online classes have been super helpful. Like I teach a lot of lettering geared towards tattooing and like online, and I get a lot of people who are very interested and very excited to take the class.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's being said. I think there's different modes of learning, and I think that's something that all of us have had to navigate, right? Like even if it's not learning, even just working, interacting with people, like it's all been online, and now some things are shifting back in person. But I think for me, like, because I also take a ton of classes all the time, I think there's different modes. Like for lectures, I love like listening online. But like for interactive hands-on classes, just like calligraphy, like I think I need to be really engaged. Like as in like I need to learn this, I need to want to learn this so badly that I am willing to be on my screen for hours longer than I signed up for my workday, which I think is a huge leap. And so it's been good and bad for me in the sense where like, oh my gosh, this person is teaching and this person never comes over to like my area, so like I really want to take this class, I'll do it, but like I need to be really engaged. Like there's been just as many times where I've been like, oh, this is really cool, and then I just go like, oh, but like the weather's really nice, like I would rather go like walk my dog, like, right, like it's just so easy. And I think like there's also the soft experiences that we get of traveling to a classroom and then meeting other like-minded people, which I think is also like the hard part, where like I think like we've also spoken about being in that silo. I think Jessie spoke about it earlier, where like, oh, like sometimes I feel like I was the only person who was interested in this or wanting to connect the dots between this. And I think like when you show up in a group of other people, someone might be like, oh, I've had this similar thought, or I've had similar struggles, or my letter sucks, but it turns out that like my letter is like kind of okay compared to like, like we're all in it together and struggling all together. Like it's not like I have the worst letters and like everybody's like, like just doing completely different. Yeah, so I think we just like, at least for me in my head, I like try to think about like online learning as a different mode of learning that has different requirements. And yeah, for better or worse, like I've as Jessie was talking about earlier, like I've shifted a lot of things that I teach online to be like more screen based and like less of like hands-on, like because I can't be like, oh no, just less pressure, please. And they're just like seeing someone there and you're just like, I am, me as an empath is just, oh no, how do I help this person? Yeah, so yeah, those are just my unorganized thoughts.
I want to say also that, when in the early days of the society, where we were all coming together in person, not only learning together, but interacting with one another, there was such a camaraderie. There was such, I think back on all the people that I met and how often we would get together. And it was really a community of people that I don't know if it exists today. I'm grateful that the society is still going, but Eleanor, I mean, I'm sure you remember all the people, Robert Rubian and Mort, whatever his name was, and, Paul Freeman. We would all hang out together, and it was, we all got to know one another. So it was far more than just calligraphy. And those bonds, I mean, Eleanor, I've known you how many years? These are tight bonds that we have and, and share. And that was wonderful. And also I want to say my mailbox was full of calligraphic letters from other scribes. Now all I get are bills,
or emails
and junk mail and email. And I mean, I have a collection somewhere of all the letters that I received from all over the world. I had a pen pal in Krasnodar, Russia, Leonid Pronenko, and he had a most exquisite italic handwriting. And we wrote to one another for many years. Anyway, that's what I kind of miss, is that part of it.
I would just add that goes back to what we were saying earlier about the community having been very small in the beginning. So that when you took a workshop at the Society of Scribes at 85th Avenue, or a few years later on 17th Street at the calligraphy workshop, you saw the same people. And you all went out afterwards. And I would mention, without naming any names, there were a lot of relationships that developed and others that did not develop or ended. There was a lot going on in those days because these were the people you partied with as well as studied with. And of course, none of that can happen online. So it was, and I am still, many of the people that I'm still friends with today and very close to today, I met through calligraphy. In fact, sitting here next to me is my husband. Here he is, who was a student of mine, 30 years ago. And we're still married. So how about that?
I want to say something about Jo White. Wait, leave that up for a second. Jo White is the reason that Donald Jackson came to this country in the first place. So she was we were both heads of our respective calligraphic societies at the time of this visit, but her connection was she brought Donald Jackson to America and she introduced him to all the different, she created all the societies in a way, because that's, little societies sprung up wherever Donald taught. So
I know, didn't she organize the first calligraphy conference as well?
She may have. Her organization was called Colleagues of Calligraphy. And
yes, she did found that. Yes.
Yeah.
And she spearheaded, the whole St. John's Bible thing. She made that a reality for Donald Jackson. So anyway, I just wanted to give her a shout out.
I love hearing all these stories. I really.
Sam Lightman, this is Sam Lightman lettering. Very sadly, Sam Lightman got hit by a car in Queens and was killed. But he did fantastic. I still have some of his work in my flat files. He would do brush lettering, and he was a sign painter, really. Yeah. So that was a fun workshop.
Yeah, I was there.
I tried to find some of the old newsletters. This was the early, I know somewhere I have packed away, oh God, in my deep files, but this is from 1989. And, in the early days, we would go over to Paul Freeman's apartment on 96th Street and Central Park West, and we would all volunteer. We would put together the newsletters, and some of them were hand colored. They were it was, and we would stamp them and we would take them to the post office. So there was a whole, everybody pitched in. That was another thing.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're talking about this, I'd like to also open up the chat for questions. So if you have any questions for the panel, please post them. And one question that Karen D'Angelo has posed and Aliona has also seconded is, digital tech has really taken hold. How can young people, teens, get involved in learning handwriting skills?
think they have to take classes. I think that it's not going to be taught in their schools because handwriting, penmanship is very limited as a subject. I mean, the number of schools teaching penmanship is very limited. However, go online. I mean, that's the thing. You're going to find so many opportunities to take basic introduction to calligraphy, basic handwriting, probably even Palmer method if you want to study that. But I think everything is there now. I think if you wait for your high school to offer a class, you're going to be waiting a long time.
I just did a career day for a high school in Philadelphia, which was very weird for me because I'm a tattooer, but I made it more lettering oriented rather than tattoo oriented. And I had a really great response from these kids in high school that were like, oh my God, like this is what we wanted to learn. Like, this is what we wanted to learn about, you know, and you know, everybody like in some capacity was writing in their notebooks and making letters in some capacity. So you know, it was a great response to lettering. So I did like a quick little class on, you know, lettering structure and stuff. So I'm hopeful that maybe, you know, maybe one day they'll bring it back. Who knows?
I see. Joanna, I was wondering, Lynn, referring to your works, those pieces are enormous. How large do you work?
Oh, I suppose I'm not like exactly sure which pieces you're referring to, but for the murals, I think the largest one was maybe 40 feet wide and maybe like 10 feet, 10 no, 15 feet tall or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's at some point it just becomes like color by numbers because I don't really know what I'm doing. Like I'll just like label them and then I'll just go inside and brush them. And sometimes I think like another one that you might have seen like on the first image slide that Deborah showed was they're woven tapestries. So those I worked like you know with my hand on pen and paper, and then it got translated you know into a machine that wove them.
Following up from that, I'm wondering if y'all could talk about how your study of calligraphy has enabled you to work on something really unique. Like, could you describe like a really unique work that you've done? We saw earlier at the start, you know, a slideshow of some of your works, but like, could you give an example of just something that wouldn't be expected, but it was your study and knowledge of calligraphy that helped educate what you came up with?
I would just say everything. I mean, you know, there's a wonderful quote by Isabella Duncan, and I'm paraphrasing. Someone said to her, you know, how long did it take you to learn to do that move or whatever? And she said, something like everything I've ever done in my life has led up to this moment. And I just want to say for myself that the calligraphic map of the United States, I was approached by a big advertising agency, and they had been unable to solve that creative vision typographically. And so I was kind of their last resort. And I had one weekend, and they had already created the layout. So they had a space for the United States of America. I had to do 600 city names, and each of the city names had to fit into the actual shape of the state that they were in. So some states had very few cities, and some states had a lot of cities. It was incredibly complicated. Somehow I managed, yeah, that piece, that's in a book, but this existed in an ad, if you can imagine it. And so, wait, it's out of focus now, but I don't know, it's getting all, well, whatever. You can see, and this has, oh, I'm sorry, this is a different piece. So I did that piece, and then I was inspired to do this piece after 9/11, which was a map of the United States encompassing all of the verses of America the Beautiful. And what I learned from the first thing was to learn to shape my letters to fit something. So the calligrams for me were a big shift.
Je ne me trompe pas, Pierre Demar, je vous propose de le retrouver dans un instant. Pierre Demar.
Ina, did it show up for you on the screen? Sorry, I'm trying to
it showed up, but then it was sharp for a minute and then it got blurry.
Oh, because it's clear on my end. I can put it up again.
Oh, okay. So anyway, but the other one, the first one was actually, I don't have that in my slides, but it was really a puzzle getting it to fit in the shape that they had left for it. But then this is the actual shape of the United States. This map is correct. And I even have Alaska and Hawaii in there. And it was, you know, it was cathartic for me because this was my act of patriotism after 9/11 happened. It was my love letter to our country. And it almost magically worked out by itself. I don't think I did a sketch. This is so crazy. I did not do a sketch. It just flowed. And that's because I did the previous map, which was for the Chayette Day Commission. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking too long.
You know, Fen, could you repeat that question briefly?
Just like to hear about like a unique project that you worked on that was educated by your study of calligraphy.
Okay, so I can answer that, which is I think you might have seen the cover of the book that I did called Paris Auschwitz, which is a collection of some of my work that has constituted the majority of my artwork for the last 15 years, which is a project of calligraphic, it's not that, of calligraphic paintings in memory of the children of Paris who were deported to Auschwitz during the Holocaust. And I live half the year in Paris and have done so for the last 20 years. And I was inspired by memorial plaques in Paris commemorating these thousands of children who died in the camps. And I started to make art based on the words in the plaques. So this is, in fact, right at the moment, I'm at the Jewish Museum of New Jersey, where I will be showing this work in May and June. And right now there's a gala going on right behind the door, which is, if you hear noise in the background, they're doing a big party, which I am supposed to be at some point this afternoon. But this project has been front and center in my life. And it's something that has all of my calligraphic training and my fine art training has gone into this work.
Yeah, I can also talk about like that. I mean, as as everyone has said, like it just flows into everything, right? Like it's I have to say, like, even though like a lot of my work these days that are client-based are mostly digital, I think the way that I think about getting to the end result is very much oriented in how I would write it. And so I guess like the specific image of the tapestries that was just up on the screen a little while ago, like I think like like when I tend to design like type or lettering, thank you. I'm trying to see if the image that will come up. Yes, yeah. So for this, for example, at the end it was vectorized, like meaning it was made like more digitally refined, so that like the tapestry machines would have an easier time, like, you know, decoding which was white and which was like dark for the threads. Like they all started on paper with brush and ink, you know, just like writing it out on the paper multiple times, just so like, you know, like I can have like 50 different A's, 50 different B's, and so forth, and I can all compile them together. And like, although like I am comfortable working digitally and I do have an iPad and all of those things, like for me to do that digitally would have been really inefficient. Like to sit there with a Procreate, which is essentially just like, you know, you can have brushy, I guess, digital brushes, but like they won't respond in the Z space. Like, you know, like the pressure that you get with like a physical tool, like just still can't be emulated. And so that to emulate that would have taken me so much brain power and extra effort for no reason, compared to just like picking up like a physical tool. And also like there's that like kinetic motion where if I have if I'm working with my hands and my body, there's a lot of natural gestures that happen, like a lot of curves that happen because, I have joints in my fingers, like in my wrists and in my arms that allow me to do that like curved motion, which is like not like digitally like which is not something that happens naturally on digital space because we don't, work in this virtual 3D space yet anyway. And also like when it comes to like the more like digital animations that I do, like when it comes to creative code, like I have to think about like how to build something from scratch, like with code. And even then, like folks might think that calligraphy have nothing to do with it. But like when I'm thinking about how to build up certain shapes, I just know from like, oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, I just know from my experience with calligraphy that like, oh, like even if like the letter is supposed to look like a certain outline, I can build it with let's say like a ductus in mind, right? Like which is like the way in which you write things. And so like these are little things that nobody might think has to do with any of my digital work, but it definitely comes into play because the way I think about like things getting built. Yeah, even in something like this, where like I imagine like how I might draw it with like a pencil outline on paper and I translate that. Yeah, so I guess it's just a long spiel to say like it might be invisible, but it's definitely there like all the time.
Very cool stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I similarly like I don't use much technology, but I do use an iPad every now and then, and it's just not like writing lettering on the iPad, while there are like even tattooers that specialize in lettering have created like brushes that are supposed to be, kind of mimic a broad pen or a pointed pen, and it's just not the same. So there's nothing like pen and paper truly. And then that is something I like push in all my workshops and stuff for tattooers, because I'm like, everybody now is used to the iPad and they're used to just printing out whatever or just drawing it on Procreate. But it really is it's just you don't get the same results as doing it by hand essentially. So I agree with you.
And now I'd like to ask, as we're approaching the end of the program here, like final thoughts you have, or maybe a final conversation for the last 15 minutes. If we could just talk about like, where do we see the state of calligraphy going? How do we keep it alive? How do we keep, guilds going and getting people involved, and not just in the study of calligraphy, but in enforcing or enhancing a calligraphy community that we can all stay tuned in to. I know there were some comments in the chat too about, maybe if we like the Society of Scribes has a monthly event or a monthly thing, a get together thing that we can do, things like that. What are some of the things that you see we can do to keep calligraphy going? 50 years on from its inception, when the calligraphy began with the formation of the Society of Scribes in 1974. But yeah, what can we all do to keep calligraphy going strong? How can we support the scene itself and the community?
I think sorry to interject, but I think we just have to let people know that this exists, because I don't like when I tell people I'm like a part of Society of Scribes or Philadelphia Calligrapher Society, and they're like, wait, what? Like there's other people that do that like this, like people don't know that these things exist. So I'm like out there just like spreading the word. I'm like, come join, take classes, so I'm excited to just like keep telling people that that we all exist, that we're here.
Well, first of all, there's the website, is great. I would say, how can we drive traffic to the website? More social media. I know, Fan, you're terrific, and all the people who contributed to keep the society going. It's fantastic. I know it's volunteer work and it's so much work, but social media is so powerful. We need to all be influencers. And And yes, I mean, get the word out, but now we have the internet, so that's a great way to do it. Actually, back in 1974, there was an article, a short article in the New Yorker about Donald Jackson and the Pentalic and the original calligraphy workshop. And we need more of that kind of thing. You know, the mainstream media would be good.
I think that I definitely support everything that's going on with social media, but I think we also need to be visible in alive, and it's all about promotion. It's all about spreading the word, exactly as you said, Jessie. More exhibitions. We have to get the work out there. You need people that are willing to fight for it, you know, that are willing to go to the museums, libraries, galleries and say, we have art. This is art. This is not just, you know, hobby stuff. This is art. I remember hearing a lecture some years ago. I don't remember, maybe it was you and Clayton, talking about how little calligraphy there is in museums, how it's ignored. All kinds of art is acknowledged, and calligraphy very rarely is, aside from, you know, one or two very significant places like the Morgan Library. But I think that especially I'm going to, you know, reach out to the young people who have more energy than the old people and say, you know, use social media, use email, use whatever you can to get opportunities for the world to see what we do. And I think that will encourage people to support calligraphy. It'll encourage people. There's somebody, you know, a very fine organizer in Singapore named Dorothy Lynne, whose goal it is to get calligraphy art legitimatized. So she has exhibitions, she has auctions, she is trying to sell the concept of calligraphy as art, not just envelopes.
Well, there are other people doing that too. Karen Chariton is someone who, you know, has developed her whole calligraphy practice into fine art and who's been exhibited. And, you know, there's like fantastic Arabic calligraphy at the Metropolitan Museum, which I just saw. You know, yes, there have to be exhibitions, but how do you get people to go to the exhibitions? And so I would just say that it's kind of on everyone who's here and who's attending to do your own best to promote calligraphy and make it more visible. You know, when I was president of the society, I know this is crazy, we had 1,200 members. And there were some famous members. I know it's very hard to get people to join, but you know, you have to encourage your students to join, and you have to drive traffic to the website. And social media is very, very powerful. You know, there's
before the internet that we had 1,200 members.
Yes,
there was no internet.
I know that was with no internet, but I think that it could be again. You know, there's like 8 bagel places here on the Upper West Side, and they're all pretty good. But there's one where there are long lines all the time in all kinds of weather, and it's because they have this like social media following. They're the same bagels as everybody else. So I think we really need to do more to publicize the society. When we put our own calligraphy work, for example, I'm thinking now of my Behance site with my calligraphy. I should really say something on there about the Society of Scribes. I should have a link to the Society of Scribes. It just occurred to me that I don't have that. I'm going to do it. So everybody should do their part.
That's great. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I mean, like I'm going to be doing the New York City Tattoo Convention at Terminal 5 in July. It's going to be huge, and I'm going to get permission from all of you, but I want to hang a little Society of Scribes banner at my booth. So people ask me what it is. You know, I want people to know I'm a part of this. Like, there's a huge thing that you can take. You can learn this. You can take classes. I want to make stickers. Like, I want to get the word out, like, to New Yorkers and beyond, that you know, that we exist. So
excellent.
Yeah, I also think it's like the great community. It's like, you know, the great community. I think everybody wants to be a part of a group of people that are like-minded and nice and welcoming. And I think, you know, like the Society of Scribes and, you know, our community is that. Like, they're like calligraphers are just all so nice. And we all, you know, we all have this like obviously shared hobby where we can sit around and like, you know, like have a good time with, right? Like I feel like it like has all the components of like a great like hang.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things where like I mean, no matter what hobby it is, or like profession you want to choose, like the group of people that you're signing up to hang out with have to be a good hang. And we have that. So I think it's also like, right, like on top of all the advertising, it's like more like, oh, like come with me, like grab a friend when you're going to a workshop, right? And then like they make friends, and then like people there make friends, and then like we all show up to like classes together or like an exhibition together, right? Like creating that base crowd where like there's going to be that like, you know, creating our own little calligraphy cult. You know, we're
Yeah.
already converted, you know.
Yeah,
Well,
I feel the same. Like it's just I felt so welcomed in Society of Scribes, and I'm like so excited because I know I tattoo, so it's kind of like I'm not, you know, I don't do like, you know, calligraphy specific art. Like I use it for tattooing. I mean I do, but I use it for tattooing mostly. So being welcomed into Society of Scribes is amazing, and I'm like beyond grateful for all of you. And I mean, even like Anna gave me a bunch of like old letter arts reviews, and I go through, like I look at them every day, you know, and I'm like, I couldn't believe that she was so you know, just like she's my friend, you know, like she's giving me these like letter arts reviews, and I'm like, what, this is so cool. Like I've made a whole community of friends here. It's amazing.
Yeah, I
and
also want to plus one, you know, Anna, also sending lots of love to Anna. Like, I mean, like, it's, I mean, like, I feel like everything that I go through in life, like, I always like do things that like make me happy and give me little pieces of joy. And just like what you said, Jessie, there's like pens that like Anna gave me. And like, you know, like on some days, maybe I might not have done calligraphy. At least I don't post them on social media and stuff. But like, sometimes I just see that pen, I'm just like, oh, and then like I'll sit down and like do little like letters for like, you know, like 15 minutes with my coffee, and I'll just go about my day, be like, oh, that was a nice little moment, you know, because that reminds me of the people that I love and the thing that I love. Yeah, so just want to plus that.
so following up on that too, you know, Lynn, what you're talking about like forming the community, and Eleanor, what you were talking about how your husband was a former student, is that perhaps we can market calligraphy as a great place to get together, hook up, forget Tinder. You know, there are other ways to start dating and meeting people, and you know, finding your true love. Uh, and so, and that might also address Barry's question on how do we convince the younger set why they should learn calligraphy. You know, you can hook up, you can, you know, it's a way to date or whatever, or find your significant other. But you know, adding a bit to the original question that I had about, you know, the future of calligraphy and what we can do to promote it. And responding to Barry's question too about getting younger people involved, is that, you know, I do see this kind of diffusion of calligraphy, especially on Instagram and others, where people are just kind of learning on their own, and which is fine, but sometimes it feels like they're also reinventing the wheel. And you know, and there are, you know, as weird as it sounds, people who are very reluctant to don't want to learn how to do calligraphy because they think it's too constraining, and they feel that, you know, they can just teach themselves. And but often what I see when with people teaching themselves and kind of learning from scratch is they all end up with the same kind of final product. It looks the same as everyone else who has no background education in calligraphy. So they think that they're kind of like, you know, it's too constricting to be taught formal calligraphy. But what it is it becomes constricting because their vocabulary on how to express letter forms is so limited that it looks like everyone else who's trying to do the same thing. So yeah, you know, it is something that we have to struggle with about how to get people involved and see that, lettering is so much bigger than what their own perception is, that people who might be very open to letter form expression, calligraphy, lettering arts, all of that, typography, and yet they don't know where to go. They don't know what's the advantage of learning formally, because all they see is, oh, it's cool, I can do this, I can do that. But you could do so much more, and you can also develop an eye for how to see letters if you get that kind of formal training. So aside from and this is how we'll be concluding, is aside from promoting calligraphy or like, Society of Scribes events as an alternative to Tinder, what else can we do how do we deal with this kind of diffusion of calligraphy into, everyone is doing it, but but so few people are really, wanting to learn it and approach it as a thing that takes years to develop, that you'll never master it. How do you get people to appreciate calligraphy in that way, rather than just, oh, that's a really cool flourish, I want to do the same thing?
I think that's a modern day problem, with learning anything, where people want a quick fix. They want to take a diet pill and lose 20 pounds this weekend. And I think that we have to just keep repeating. Oh dear, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, I'm in the middle of something else that's going on here. I'm gonna turn this over to Ina for the moment, and I'll finish my sentence, and I'm after.
Well,
I'm not sure the things that we need to do is
I'm
to
not sure.
focus on men. If you look at the group here today, and in general, just 2 men and 100 women, I think if there was a way we could think of enticing men to become more interested in the group, I think that would be very important. It's half the audience, could be.
Well,
Fawn?
Oh, sorry. I have a little idea. I mean, I don't know. I know my friends in tattooing, they're always interested in they're always interested to see references, and they're always interested to see what books I have. Like I said, I use Anna's books all the time, and the magazines she sent me, and we're always like diving into like who did that. And I'm lucky enough to work in a studio where it's half tattooers and half designers. So it's a studio that does like type design and tattooing. So like daily, like we talk about like lettering history, and we go through references daily. So it would be cool to do something like that on social media, maybe like once a week or once a month, like send us some cool references and get people involved, maybe in like a small group chat or something.
Or any way to use social media to our advantage, I would just say. And it's pretty easy to, entry point is very simple. We can do individual things. We could do group things. Yeah, I mean, people, but I think, in terms of how long it takes to learn, I think it's best to be honest about that. It's like learning to play the piano. You have to do scales over and over before you learn. And there are still people who care about that. I know when I go to typography things, and Lynn, you'll second me on this, I'm often the oldest person in the room. I mean, young people are very, very interested in typography. And I think that that could bleed over, or does bleed over, into calligraphy. And no detail too small. I mean, I'm fascinated by, sometimes I won't know anyone at, say a talk at Cooper Union. And that's really digging down into the weeds about some, letter forming thing. And so I believe there's a great deal of interest out there, and that people will, they need to be directed toward us, but I don't think there's a problem with them taking on a complicated, lengthy study. I think people are still willing to do that. Some people, yeah.
I'd like to follow up on what Ina just said, which I really admire. Several years ago, there was a type teacher, a graphic arts teacher from SVA, who was in a calligraphy workshop. And she asked me if I would come and talk about the history of calligraphy to her students. So I said, sure. So it was like the first time in God knows how many years that I spoke to a bunch of 18-year-olds, but they were studying type, but she wanted me to talk specifically about calligraphy and its history. So I pretty much had to race through the history of calligraphy from Roman times, let's say, through the Middle Ages. And they were fascinated by it. Now, these were young people who were learning type, but they were fascinated by the broad edge pen and what it could do. And they became very interested. I brought them all felt tip pens so they could at least understand the dynamics of the broad edge pen. And then at the conclusion, the chestnut question, is calligraphy dead? And I said to them, it's not dead. It's a niche art. Wherever there is an appreciation for finely made, hand-wrought things and beautiful things, looking back to William Morris's quote about having only beautiful things in your house, wherever there is an appreciation, calligraphy will be alive. So I hope that inspired them.
Thanks, Barry. We are approaching the end of the program here. And so I'd like to thank Eleanor, Ina, Lynne, and Jessie for being here and presenting their perspectives. 2 generations worth of calligraphers within our 50-year anniversary event. This is the inaugural kickoff of the events that we're doing on behalf of the 50th anniversary of the Society of Scribes, and we will have more events coming soon. So please stay tuned. Our website is societyofscribes.org. There were a lot of great comments and suggestions in the chat. If you want to save the chat, then there are 3 dots at the very bottom of the chat panel that you can click on and choose Save Chat, because there's a lot of great input that people have provided. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this event here, and I'd like to thank everyone on the panel. Stay tuned, because there are more panel discussions to be held this year and more exciting things that we'll be doing to promote the 50th anniversary of the invention of calligraphy when the Society of Scribes was formed back in 1974.
Ben?
Uh-huh.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Cynthia.
You can look
Oh,
forward
really
to
quick.
an entire month, our exhibition, our Jubilee exhibition at the National Arts Club. They are giving us an entire month of October at a very reduced fee. They're being very good to us. More later.
Thanks, Cynthia. Stay tuned for that. Get onto our mailing list. Get onto societyofscribes.org. Any final comments before we go?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have to
Hey,
go now.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
It was
Thanks,
great.
Eleanor.
Hi, Eleanor.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I wanted to talk more about the early days of the society, but maybe there's another event that you're covering, because I think I saw the history of the society listed somewhere. So
Well,
yeah,
you know what, Ina, if people are interested and want to hang on for a moment, I'd love to hear it.
really.
And if you have to go, then you have to go, but it will be in the recording. We will post this on the Society of Scribes YouTube channel.
Okay, well, I'm sorry that Eleanor's gone, but Siegfried was here, and the early days, it was just there was a lot of politics too. So Donald kind of left this group of people who realized they had this incredible experience and that they should form a society. And then how power abhors a vacuum. Well, Jeannie, there was Alice there, and a lot of big famous calligraphy people, but none of them wanted the responsibility of being the president of this organization. And so Paul Freeman, who was a big burly guy, he was just very bossy, and he was a big presence, and he kind of took over, and he was a self-appointed president. And then over time, I mean, we still did a lot of really great things, had great workshops and everything, but he was just such a bossy presence. And I was sort of the only one who would talk back to him. So after a while, everybody decided they wanted to have an election, our first election. And, Jeannie didn't want to do it. Alice didn't want to do it. Lily Ronker didn't want to do it. Nobody really wanted to go up against Paul because he was such a presence. And so I said, oh, all right, I'll do it. I was like 20 something. I was like 23, I think, in 1974. And and it became really it was a huge responsibility, and it was almost a full-time job keeping up with the correspondence. And I was living in New Jersey at the time and coming into New York. And anyway, I put a lot into the society, and I'm so glad that all I want to say, I don't want to go on anymore. I just want to say that it's amazing to me and absolutely wonderful that it's still happening. And that's all I can say. God bless everybody who's participated, contributed, benefited from a teacher, been a teacher. It's it's a very worthwhile thing, and calligraphy has been the touchstone of my life as an artist and as a human being. It has gotten me through tough times. It's gotten me through great times, and it's been part of everything that I do. And that's, I hope it means as much, and that's why I think it will always go on. Okay, that's it.
I also wanted to add on to just say that, like, thank you to everyone at Society of Scribes. And like I know, like, I feel like we've all been in this like fog haze of the pandemic still kind of coming out, I suppose, but like the online programming that's been coming out from Society of Scribes has been terrific. Like the lecture series, like the lineup of instructors, like it's just been so great. And so I just wanted to send a big, like, giant heart and like thank you for all of that. It's been really great.
The holiday fairs, Anna Pinto, so many important good people. So thank you.
And I'd like to thank Deborah Dick for helping out with the technical stuff in the background here, Anna Pinto for organizing this event, and Barry Morantz for helping to organize the 50th anniversary festivities. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So stay tuned. There will be
Thank
more
you.
events coming up this year in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Society of Scribes and the 50th anniversary of the invention of calligraphy. So have a nice day, everybody.
And thank you, Fawn. You
Thank
did a
you,
great
Fawn.
Job.
Yes.
Yeah,
Great,
thank you. Thank you.
great
Thanks.
question.
Please consider helping out however you can throughout the year.
Societyofscribes.org. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Ron.